love nobody. Only man to know your...
Sego, it is January 15th. Welcome to Let's Talk Native on the LTN Radio Network. This program breaks all the rules for Native radio. No buffalo speeches, no mystic healing, no special Indian prayers. We tackle the real issues facing Native people with a look back at our glorious and our grave history, a tough look at where we're at now, and a look forward to our ongoing battles for sovereignty and autonomy. Let's Talk Native is produced in association with Iroquois Promotions on the LTN Radio Network, streaming live from the Cattaraugus territory of the Seneca Nation and simulcast and rebroadcast on the Gwe, that's CKWE in Tandanega. You can find us at www.ltnradionet.com. And you know, on that site, we always have a show playing. Just when we go live, we go live. So for the next hour, we are going to talk a little bit about MLK Day. So, and Martin Luther King. I am John Kane. I'm the show's host and producer, and I'm joined in studio by Matt Hill.
Hi, how's it going?
All right, and I've got Jake Proud manning our cameras and running our soundboard. Our cameras are not only for our Facebook live stream, but for our YouTube videos. We put this show up on our YouTube channel, which is Let's Talk Native TV. I encourage you and urge you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you can check out not only videos of our show, but other shorter videos that we produce from time to time. And it's a great opportunity for you to not only see it, but also use. Most people don't realize that you can comment on YouTube. And as I look at even some pretty, I think, significant videos, there still isn't the commentary that oftentimes you certainly will find on other social networks. So feel free to comment there. Of course, we are Facebook Live. We are streaming live here on Facebook, and I am looking for your comments. So I'm looking for you to weigh in on some of the things that we mentioned here and we talk about, and we do have a bit to talk about. It is Martin Luther King Day, and and it's interesting. Let me shed some of my electronics here. It's interesting. I'm still tied up. All right.
Supposed to do that before the show.
On a day like today, where Martin Luther King is supposed to be remembered, it's like it's cherry picked, and even on a day that's supposed to be, celebrating his life, it is his birthday. It celebrates his birthday. It's whitewashed, and so in fact, the entire civil rights era has been whitewashed. And when I hear folks like Donald Trump weigh in, and not just Donald Trump on the right, but even Andrew Cuomo and some of these others, because if I go back, I mean, obviously last week, Trump stepped in it by using his comment about countries of origin for immigrants that he doesn't want coming to the United States, people of color primarily, because apparently Norway is fine, but the ones that have black people or brown people, we don't necessarily, and that's the view that he's had. And he referred to it in a very derogatory term. And everybody weighed in. But I also, and among the people that weighed in was Andrew Cuomo. So, and among the things I want to talk about today is the whitewashing of history. And when we talk about whitewashing history, we aren't just talking about whitewashing what took place 50 years ago, or 100 years ago, or 200 years ago.
Talking days.
Yeah, days ago. So Andrew Cuomo weighs in, and he gives all of this whole thing about, talking about, Trump's comments and how he must have a short memory and doesn't realize that, and he said, this is a country of immigrants. He said, we're all immigrants. And then he offered his little obligatory, well, except for Native Americans. But then he regrouped us. But we're all immigrants. There was nobody here. There was nobody here. I mean, he reiterates this thing even after making his tiny little course correction. Well, I got to tell you, Mr. Cuomo, we ain't nobody. So when you suggest, and even with your little tiny disclaimer about, oh yeah, Native Americans, there was a significant and a vibrant population on this continent before the likes of you and your ancestors, or any of the European ancestors, came here. Before Columbus, before John Cabot, before Plymouth Colony and Jamestown, before any of that, the rape and the pillaging of South America and the Caribbean. Before any of that, we're talking about island paradises like Puerto Rico that have been, reduced, to dens of poverty. Island paradises like Hawaii that have been turned into military, installations, where the people there who lived in an island paradise can't even afford to live there. A land that was overtaken. And in fact, in a couple of days is the 125th anniversary of the illegal overthrow of the Kingdom of Hawaii and the illegal occupation of Hawaii. So when you want to talk about about creating shitholes, well, you guys did it, all of you. And I made a reference to this in the last show. You want to look at some of what has become of our pristine lands? You take a couple of pictures of Detroit. Take a couple of pictures of Niagara Falls. Go up to Pine Ridge. Pine Ridge is a creation of American policy. But every one of those countries, Haiti, Nigeria, El Salvador, it's got European fingerprints everywhere. Yeah, the tar sands of Alberta. So when I hear these guys who want to sound all righteous about their understanding of the immigrant status of the U.S., you also left something else out. When you say that we, and I don't mean me as in we, but we as in you, are a country of immigrants, did you forget that an entire population of people were dragged here in chains in the bottom of boats? And they didn't come here. They came here and worked, but they weren't looking for work. They weren't looking for work as slaves. So as these righteous white men of power, whether it's Trump or whether it's Cuomo, and yeah, I'm going after Cuomo because everybody knows that Trump's a racist. But I listen to the applause every time, the applause lines that Andrew Cuomo was getting, as he failed to recognize that black people did not come here willingly at the founding of the United States. Now, there've been plenty of immigrants since, and I'm not condemning them, but let's be clear: the bulk of the population of black African Americans were bred in captivity. I mean, their ancestry traces back to the slave trade. So don't talk about how we all came here. We all came here to realize a better life, to pursue the American dream. That's what this country was here for. When I hear him say stuff like that, this country was built for the downtrodden. Send us your poor. Send us your, no. No, you got that wrong, Governor. And you're the one who's going to stand up in front of the press and say, well, those Senecas, they have a history of breaking deals. Well, I'll tell you, you white people have a history of whitewashing history. You guys have a history, and I think it's important that people realize that. I've talked about. I mean, you have the overt racists, and there's no question about what Donald Trump is. I mean, and you can't be more racist when you try to use these superlatives to say, I am the least racist person you will ever see. Well, what does that even mean? I mean, for Trump to say that he's the least racist person anybody's ever going to interview to the news media, I mean, give me a freaking break. But even people who when you read some of what they've written or what they say, I mean, again, I talked about the book on American imperialism. So I listened to Stephen Kinzer, the author of True Flag, talking about the Philippines and the atrocities that the United States committed against the Philippines. And he has the gall to say that America lost its innocence in the Philippines. What do you mean they lost their innocence? In the 20th century, they lost their innocence? Well, what about slavery? What about massacres of Native people? What about trails of tears and residential schools and not making any of the payments associated with the so-called treaties you shoved down our throats? What about slavery and lynching and that would go on for decades? Look, civil rights didn't get solved in the 60s. There are still unarmed black men being killed by cops on a regular basis. And it's not just black people either. In the nation's capital, there's an NFL franchise that has a racist slur for its name. And most Americans are okay with it. And when I post a meme that says, racism is so American that when people of color protest racism, white people think we're protesting America. I'm not just trying to be witty there. It's true. I mean, this is just true. I mean, and you can see it. And you can see it clearly in guys like Colin Kaepernick. I mean, he literally sat and took a knee to protest racism as it relates to police officers using lethal force against people of color. Not even just black people. This wasn't just a Black Lives Matter thing. I mean, he was very clear when he talked about people of color. Because Colin Kaepernick knows that Native people are high. Actually, in many of the demographics, we are killed at a higher rate than any other people of color in the United States by police. And yet, everybody turned that into a patriotism thing. Oh, he kneeled. He hates America. Well, you know what? If you're trying to stand for something to improve a circumstance, I'm not saying you're doing it out of patriotism, but it certainly can be viewed that way. I mean, I dedicate my life to trying to correct some problems, not because I'm trying to make America great. I'm trying to improve our lives, our quality of life. I'm fighting back against the United States. The United States isn't. I could care less about making America great. Because that problems existed. Began in 1492. It was fine before then, and many parts of Turtle Island were fine for many years after that until.
But what you're looking for, you kind of have to influence change though to get that. You have to work towards. I mean, we're picking away at it a little piece by piece, but you do have to affect change in society, is what it comes down to.
Well, yeah, but again, even for many of us who are trying to raise issues of of racism, or any kind of discrimination or any kind of I guess injustice, it is really for those who are suffering from the injustice. Now, in doing so, it should make life better for everybody. I mean, fairness isn't just about taking something away from people who are privileged. I mean, it does require some of that. But and it's true, if we are successful in creating real justice and equity and parity or fairness, I mean, then yeah, everybody's life really improves, except for the people who are clinging on to their privilege and that their lives depend on it. And even though white privilege is a thing that all white people enjoy, some people exploit it far more effectively than others. And so when I hear a white person say, "Well, I don't have privilege," well, you do. You just haven't learned how to use. You just haven't learned. You're so far down.
That's been
on the
accepted
list
as a norm. They don't even notice anything different.
Well, and the thing is about racism. Racism, as it again, it's defined as not just racial bias, but it's about superiority. It's about dominance. So racism is about believing that one race is superior to another race just based on that genetic makeup, based on that perceived race. But it's also about the system being skewed to provide benefit to that believed superior race. And so one of the things that was born out of even the Bacon Revolution back in the 1600s, believe it or not, when very poor, impoverished indentured servants, white indentured servants, actually teamed up with slaves, and they rebelled against their lords, so to speak, their masters. That's when this whole idea of being clear that there had to be an agenda. So this is under British rule in Virginia, that they had to convince that the lowliest of white man is still better than the best black man. And that's how Trump gets elected after Obama. And I'm not, suggesting that Obama was the best black man that ever walked the earth, but clearly he was an articulate, educated, well-spoken, a good father, appears to be a good husband, all that other stuff. And then there's Trump. And just by virtue of him being white and wealthy, but primarily just white, he was a necessary follow-up to the United States, the first black president of the United States. I mean, that's just kind of the way it had to go, right? I mean, one of the things that was clear, and I recognize this when Obama got elected, that there would be hell to pay. Obviously, it was the rise of the Tea Party, the rise of KKK, and all of these militia groups. A lot of white supremacy became motivated by this idea. I mean, when I hear somebody say that, it is such a relief to have such a man as Donald Trump in the presidency after 8 years of Obama. Really? Yeah. I mean, come on. Look, I've got issues with Obama as it relates to policies, but really kind of specifically, as they applied to people of color, Native people, but even black people, immigrants. I mean, he deported an awful lot of people without coming up with an immigration plan. He approved pipelines through native territories, and he was trying to push turning Hawaiian people into a federal Indian tribe. I mean, these are all terrible ideas. So I have some issues. Obviously, he everything from drone strikes to his time at the helm of the war machine. I mean, did not bode well. I mean, I have major problems with that, but he still was a more decent human being than the one that's in the White House now, in spite of all that stuff. And I realize that as in spite of the flaws that I recognize, I will still say there had never been a more incompetent person in the White House as the one that's in there now. But having said that, I still got to go back to that. This isn't just a Democrat versus Republican thing, because I hear all kinds of racist stuff come out of Democrats. And again, the chief executive officer of the state of New York, he's one of the guys that's quick to say something, not just racist. I mean, misogynist. I mean, I go back to Karen DeWitt from the Albany correspondent for the local NPR stations here, WBFO. He asked Cuomo about policies that the state might adopt to prevent sexual abuse, and Cuomo got visibly angry and said, "Well, what are you doing to fix journalism? What are you doing to address?" So he turns it on this woman, and actually began to really resemble a certain amount of sexual harassment the way he attacked this reporter's question.
He didn't have a reply, so he threw it right back in her face as the first thing he could think of.
Well, because he blamed, he lumped her in with some of the sexual misconduct that was happening and being addressed in many of these media outlets, including the film industry with his Harvey Weinstein. But he had a guy in Sam Hoyt, who was now had to get canned from his job for again, for sexual harassment and for sexual misconduct by paying somebody off in the whole bit. So as she's addressing, and she even tried to bring that up, he was noticeably angry and essentially attacked her. I mean, so this is a guy who knows no limits, whether it's attacking a female reporter for asking a legitimate question. I mean, he could have just done what all politicians do: is, well, we're going to look at it, and we're going to give some serious consideration to the things that we need to do to make sure that our existing policies are being practiced. I mean, he could have done the same kind of song of that, but he didn't even try that. He just attacked her and
didn't
said,
even bother skating.
No, I mean, it was
he
incredible.
Took it direct, probably. That's what happened.
I mean, it really amazes me. It really just amazes me. So I see that. I've heard some of the comments that have been attributed to guys like Chuck Schumer, and again, you want to look at elite white people in the United States. I mean, if Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer aren't among those people who embody white privilege, regardless of their political stripes. So when I look at this thing, I mean, you only have to look at Congress and look at the makeup of Congress. It's almost all white people. Yeah, there's some black people there and a few people of color. There was even a woman who of Haitian descent who spoke out strongly against Trump's comments. But and again, I'm not asking for Native people to be elected into Congress. So I'm not even going there. That's not our system, and that's the view that I hold. But no, as I listen to people try to whitewash even King. I mean, they forget that King didn't just talk about civil rights. He was talking about things like the war machine. He was against the Vietnam. I mean, he was the war in Vietnam, not against Vietnamese or the countries. He wasn't referring to Vietnam as shitholes. That would come many, many years later by the existing president. But no, this is, so people have tried to, alter his history. I mean, it's easy to forget that the country was regarding him as a threat to national security. It's real easy to sit there and praise him now, even as you maintained your own racist ideology, Mr. Trump. And those words coming from you, not just after your comments of last week, but after your comments on the campaign trail, after the way that the racist way that you even managed the buildings that you were involved in New York, the racist comments you made towards Native people, the racist way, the way you took, used the word, the name Pocahontas as an insult for a white woman in the Senate. I mean, all of this stuff. I mean, it is really incredible that any of us are forced to tolerate a guy like Trump, and again, even the racist comments that come out of Cuomo, as they're trying to sing the praises of Martin Luther King. Remember that movie White Men Can't Jump? Woody Harrelson
never really watched it.
I can't think of the other guy's name.
Woody Harrelson.
Woody Harrelson and Wesley Snipes. Yeah, Wesley Snipes. And Wesley Snipes was telling Woody Harrelson, "You can't hear Jimmy," meaning Hendrix. You can't. He goes, I listen to Jimi Hendrix on the. No, you can't hear Jimmy. Of course, Wesley Snipes didn't realize that Jimmy was also native. But I listened. I don't think these white people could hear Martin Luther King. I don't think they understood his message. They still don't understand his message, and they're misinterpreting it every single day. When I hear Donald Trump say, "Martin Luther King's dream is the American dream," bullshit.
No.
I mean, it isn't. And I'll tell you, the 30% of the American people who still think you're doing a good job, they don't support King's speech. I mean, come on. I mean, it is a mockery to have some of these guys, speak about Martin Luther King. It's an absolute mockery. And I'm not saying it because I'm trying to prop up Martin Luther King. I mean, to me, he's just one of many, and I'm not taking anything away from some of what some of what he accomplished in his lifetime. But there was Malcolm X, there was Muhammad Ali, there's Colin Kaepernick, and in our own territories there was Louis Hall. There have been people who have pushed issues and explained issues and have tried to frame American history and Canadian history. I mean, it's the same history as far as I'm concerned, but frame it in such a way that people can understand it. It's why I do what I do. I'm not just trying to tell people history they don't know, but I'm trying to share with them a perspective on how history is presented, how it is whitewashed. I've talked about Kinzer. This other book that an author was on NPR talking about was concentration camps. Talked about how one of the reasons the Spanish-American War would unfold at the dawning of the 20th century, they said, was because of America's outrage to the Spanish use of forced labor camps and concentration camps. No, it wasn't. And in fact, it would prove out later, because after the United States would spend years of aggression and murder and slaughter of Filipinos, they would subject them to the very same concentration camps that the Spanish built. And not just there. The United States wasn't, and so as this author is kind of exposing that, and even the hypocrisy of the United States claiming to fight against concentration camps, but then using them, she infers that was the first time. Well, what the hell did you think a reservation was, other than a concentration camp? When the reservation system was established, by the United States, by reducing our land holdings down to these postage stamp sized parcels of land, a native person was considered a hostile if they didn't stay on the designated lands that they were supposed to be designated to. And if they left, they could not only were they considered hostile, but it was legal to kill a native person if they were roaming free. And if you're not buying that definition of concentration camp, what the hell do you think a cotton plantation was, if not a forced labor camp? So when I hear these historians write these books, whether it's about, American imperialism in the 20th century, and completely ignore the century before that, that, my friends, is whitewashing history. I mean, if you're going to suggest that America lost its innocence in the 1900s, after the Sand Creek Massacre, which would occur on Abe Lincoln's watch, after Wounded Knee, after after all of the atrocities. I mean, because let's be clear, Matt, you had a picture of that Lady Columbia, wafting across the plains in that pictorial of Manifest Destiny. It wasn't just about relocating Native people. It was about exterminating Native people. I mean, there may be as many as 100 million people that were a population. In fact, they called it depopulation. They didn't call it murder. They called it depopulation, as if there was a chemical you could spray, on dandelions. Yeah, we're gonna buy some of that Monsanto depopulation spray, and get. No, it was about exterminating Native people. At some point, it lost its acceptability in the world, and so what would cease to exist as this idea of massacres and extermination. And although it would go on till almost the 20th century, killing would continue after that, but it would not be in the same fashion. But assimilation, and these aren't policies that began and one ended and a new one started. No, they overlapped. So extermination went hand in hand with assimilation, and assimilation went hand in hand with termination. And in case you don't know what these words mean, assimilation was the idea of making us disappear through forcing us to be, killing the Indian, saving the man, and not just the residential schools, but the idea of making us no longer be Native people. So by civilizing us, by changing who we are, it's kind of like that whole thing where people say, hey, if you don't want to get killed by cops, don't wear your pants baggy and a hoodie. Dress the way you want them. Dress the way they want you to dress. If you're a black woman, straighten your hair. Wear your hair the way they want you to wear your hair. If you're a Native person, stop acting like an Indian. That's what they told us, right? And and at some point, our parents started telling us that. So just like every generation is looking to figure out how they can have their kids survive, our parents said, we're not going to teach you the language. We don't want you. We don't want you to be punished for it. We don't want you to be saddled by a native tongue as your first language. I mean, that's why our language disappeared. That's why we live the way we live right now, and we're fighting every single day to maintain some autonomy and distinction. If I tell a white politician, basically, if I tell somebody in the media that I'm not an American, if I tell another Native person, especially from out west, one of these real BIA indoctrinated people, if I say I'm not an American, it offends them. Oh, of course you're an American. They made you an American. No, they didn't. There's no legal right to make me into an American. I'm Mohawk. I'm Ganyakahaga. I'm going away.
That first reaction is always one of shock. Like, they take back from you stating that. But then once you explain it to them and what the real reason is why you're not or don't consider yourself an American, then they in my situation, I've said that several times and people understand, but it's that matter of explaining things to them. But it's always that first initial shock is, what do you mean? course you know, like you said, of course you are. No, you're not.
Or they give you that, oh, yeah, wow.
come on.
You know, like, yeah. I know what you mean. Nod, nod, wink, wink. I mean, hey, look, we're a little past the bottom there. We'll take a break here. We'll come back. But this is relevant. And these are the conversations that people aren't having because it's uncomfortable. And it's the conversations that need to be had because it's uncomfortable. Look, we'll take a break and we'll be right back. This is John Kane with Matt Hill. This is Let's Talk Native.
Sun comes up on another day. Same faces smiling my same way. I know she feels the same way too. Damn, it's just you. Well, maybe I'm not the romantic kind. No candlelight dinners and no fine French wine. I love you, baby, but I forget to say. I know it's wrong, but I'm just that way. Feel the light, feel the light. Something going on. Feel the light, and it feels like we got trouble in the way. I'm here to tell you it wasn't always this way. You used to call me baby 10 times a day, and now the only call I ever get from you is from the bar. Half past 2. Feel the light, feel the light. Something going on. Feel the light, and it feels like we got trouble in the way. Are we grasping and strong? I still love you, that means anything.
There was a song came on the radio, a guitar instrumental, and it changed everything.
Link Ray, it's rock and roll.
Rumble. Yeah, that's the one.
Rumble.
Hey, Rumble.
Rumble had the power to help me say, I'm going to be a musician.
And then I found out that he was an Indian.
The music that we know here in the United States is fully supported by input from Native and Indigenous people.
Sego, this is John Kane from WBAI's Let's Talk. Join me on January 31st at 7 p.m. at the Brooklyn Commons, 388 Atlantic Avenue in Brooklyn, as we kick off 2018 with a free screening of Rumble, the Indians who rocked the world. All right, thanks for coming back. Yeah, I am screening Rumble in the city, so if you happen to be down there, I had the good fortune of running into my buddy Robert Delamonte down in New York last week. But
Happy birthday, Rob.
Oh, yeah, happy birthday again. Yeah, so we happen to be in the city at the end of the month on January 31st at 7 p.m. I'm going to screen Rumble. And I'll tell you, there's, again, another teaching tool. This film really does not just teach about the Native influences in music, but it talks about some of the culture sharing that existed between Native people and Black people in particular, especially coming out of some of the most overt racist times of the United States. So powerful film, well worth checking out, and I'm going to screen the film in Brooklyn at the Brooklyn Commons. That's 388 Atlantic Avenue in Brooklyn, and that's January 31st at 7 p.m. Hey, the other thing I wanted to mention is on February 14th, Valentine's Day, there is a missing and murdered Indigenous women's vigil that is being planned in various cities. A good friend of mine is doing one down in Florida. You can see the post on my Facebook group page about it. But there are many cities that are doing some form, some action or another, some commemoration or raising recognition to the plight of missing and murdered Indigenous women. Look, there was a campaign that was done a number of years ago, and I've seen it repeated. It's called it's a red dress campaign. The whole idea is taking a red dress and hanging it outside, and getting pictures. I saw one of them where there were looked like hundreds of them, and they were hung in a wooded lot. And it is eerie because you see these beautiful dresses without the women in them, and so it's really a powerful image of missing women. So one of the things that I'm trying to promote is, at very least, if you can't participate in one of these vigils, go to your closet. If you're a woman, go to your wife or your girlfriend's closet, your daughter's closet, pull out a red dress, go hang it outside, or do a series of them, and photograph it and post it. On February 14th, I would love to see as many people as possible post pictures of a red dress. And that is the symbol of missing and murdered Indigenous women. So please do that. So remember on February 14th, and I don't care if it's the whole day. I mean, you got the whole day. Just and especially where you got the snow as the backdrop and that kind of stuff. It's powerful to see these bright red dresses hanging almost stoically, and they look lonely and desolate. To hang them on a tree, whether there's wind or not. I mean, just that image of these red dresses. I was hoping that maybe we even get some folks in Central Park to do a bit of a display and display a bunch of red dresses in some area of Central Park in New York. So we'll see. But this is everybody can do this. Everybody can take a red dress and take it outdoors, hang it on a tree. You don't have to ruin the dress or anything. I mean, you just go out there, hang it up on a tree, on a branch, and take a picture and post it online. Twitter.
Leave it in the plastic if you have to. Huh?
Yeah. If you have
a good one, you want to use it again.
I mean, post it on Twitter, post it on Instagram, post it on Facebook. I mean, I just think that would be a way. I mean, because everybody will say, well, what can I do? What can I do to help? Then sometimes you make a suggestion on what they can do, and then people find excuses not to do it. This is a simple gesture. It's a simple gesture. So, grab a red dress, take it outside, hang it up on on a tree or a fence or whatever else, and that image of that empty dress is the symbol for missing and murdered Indigenous women. So that's February 14th. We got a month to plan it. It doesn't take a month to find the dress. But if you don't have one, okay, that'll be your pass. I mean,
Savers has them for cheap.
Yeah, there you go. Just run down to the Salvation Army, a thrift store, or whatever else, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be a pretty dress. You know what I'm saying? I'm not suggesting somebody's got to destroy their wardrobe here, but let's get those red dresses out there. And get the photographs of. I'm probably going to go out and take the pictures of the ones that I can come up with on that Tuesday, and I'll post them on Wednesday because I'll be in New York. So
one red T-shirt probably more representative because not too many natives wear red dresses.
Yeah, but then if you can somehow communicate that it's a woman's T-shirt, because
there you go.
Well, it's a gender thing here. So stop trying to cop out here, Matt. I mean, come on. I don't want to see your red T-shirts hanging from a tree. Nobody wants to see that. No, I'm only kidding. But anyway, I wanted to mention those two things. Hey, look, I also want to give a shout out to my sponsors, Ross and Holly John, and the RJE family of businesses, Eric White and ERW Enterprises. my good friends Ed Schindler, who I spoke to this week, by the way. It was good to catch up with Ed, and I wish him well. But I thank him for his support, Cynthia Trice, Neville Spring, Sugar Montour, and even the Seneca Nation, who has made contributions to the work that I do. I thank you all for supporting the show, and I also thank the ones who have helped in the past. I thank you all for joining in the fight and doing your part. I also want to thank Unity Stream and Apache Radio Net for providing our streaming. I want to thank CKWE, The Gway, for both their simulcast and the rebroadcast, as well as Netroots Radio, Real People's Media, and Indigenous Resistance Radio for carrying my program. And for all of you who share it, all of you who share the program, whether you share our SoundCloud posts, which is just the audio, whether you share the Facebook videos, or whether you share our videos on YouTube. I thank you all for getting the message out there. And look, I say it all the time. We, when we do the show, whether I'm here by myself or I've got Matt or a guest in, sometimes you're going to hear something you may not agree with. And that's okay. We're not trying to necessarily make you agree with us. Most of what we're trying to do is say, look, there's a perspective here that you may not have considered. So that's kind of what we're offering here. We are trying to address issues that are not addressed. I haven't heard anybody call out Andrew Cuomo for the speech that he gave the other day. And again, I don't know, the idea of listening to somebody talk about this country being a country of immigrants and ignoring the native population who was victimized by this flood of immigration, and how black people will come to predominantly become a part of the mosaic of American culture. They weren't leaving shithole countries to come here. They were dragged here by shithole countries, and then their territories, then the lands that they were stripped from, were exploited by European countries. I mean, think about the very countries that Donald Trump insulted here, and many more. How badly they were exploited. The people were exploited for slavery, or killed outright. Their lands, all their goods and possession were stolen. And you know why? You know why it was okay to do it? No, it was never okay to do it. But the church said it was okay. That's the doctrine of Christian discovery. The idea that a Christian nation, the Christian nations of Europe, could go into lands of pagan people, could kill them, could subject them to slavery, perpetual servitude, as it was said, could take their possessions, take their land. And in fact, the doctrine of Christian discovery would suggest that a pagan person, a non-Christian, could not own land because, they were like animals. If you weren't Christian, you were subhuman. So on Martin Luther King Day, as people pretend that, some will pretend that racism is a thing of the past, which it's not. Others will say, we only perpetuate racism by talking about it. No, that's not true. Oh, all people are racist. No, that's not true either. In the United States and Canada, the dominant culture, the dominant people are white people. Now, whether you want to call white people as a race or whatever else, but the people who are not of color are the ones who have rigged the game. And it's not just in the United States and Canada. You can go out through the entire Western Hemisphere. I mean, I even heard the numbers in Brazil. In Brazil, where you think about how many people of color live there. I mean, they are the majority, the people of color. Yet, their parliament, not so much. So even in countries, and even in, people talked about South Africa, or, apartheid Africa. White people ruling over a majority of people of color. We still see that in a lot of countries. A lot of countries where white people are not the majority, yet they still rule over people of color. And you know what? That's what has Americans so scared. You know why Donald Trump doesn't want people coming from countries he considers to be shithole countries? While he thinks it's great that if people would come from Norway or Sweden, because white people come from Norway and Sweden. No, I take it back. No, they don't come from Norway and Sweden because actually Norway is a better place to live than the United States. Crime rate is lower. They have free health care. They have free education. They have a higher quality of life. So, no, they don't come. But he would like it if they did.
He even referred to them as the physicists and doctors and whatnot coming from Norway and that.
Yeah, exactly.
They're not low-level jobs. He's talking about the smart ones coming from there.
Yeah. And of course that's and when I listen to this and I hear, well, yeah, we all came here and we all assimilated. No, you force, and that's the whole thing. When I hear people condemn people of colors, all those people of color, they come here and they refuse to assimilate. You look, even though there was a belief that if you Christianize a person of color, you could lighten their skin, it's not true, folks. It doesn't work that way. Jesus is not a skin whitening project. It's not a skin whitening therapy.
It worked for him.
No, white people turned Jesus into a white man. Jesus didn't actually become a white man if he existed at all. Yeah, but you're right. Oh, that's great. Yeah, that's true. White people sure did whiten Jesus, didn't they? They turned him from a person of the Middle East, a person of color. They turned him into, wavy blonde, brownish hair with blue eyes, and somebody that some of the best white actors of Hollywood could play in King of Kings, and for crying out loud. And Mary was a white woman too, right? Yeah. Oh yeah. They all turned white. The 12 apostles, they were all white people. Yeah, that happened. And what amazes me, they did manage in some of the little figurines that they make for like the nativity scenes.
Yeah.
They do manage to make at least one of the wise men black. Usually, you ever notice that? I wonder how they got away with that. I mean, because I know they had to use like Egypt or something, or Ethiopia or something. I don't know. I don't know where they claim these wise men came from. I don't know that story, but I mean, it's amazing to me that I guess they could get away with making one of the wise men. Because I tell you, Matt, you've been down south. I don't know. We've heard the old joke about how come Jesus couldn't be born in some place like Alabama. It's because I won't touch the virgin thing, but it's because they couldn't find three wise men. Oh, yeah. I mean, you've been down south, and I'll tell you, when you go to some of the southern states, just one look around is proof against this idea of white supremacy. Because I'll tell you, some of those people look pretty scary.
Come on,
they don't look like the master race, huh?
Don't be so stereotypical.
I said some. I didn't say all. Right. See, the stereotyping is when you say all people. I said some of those people provide proof against this whole notion of master race and white supremacy. Look, there are incredible people of all color or lack thereof color, and there are also terrible people in every one of those. I mean, if you got to group those people together, race or ethnicity does not imply or suggest goodness, good or evil. Actually, good and evil is a man-made construct. It doesn't exist in nature. I mean, a wolf isn't evil because it eats a rabbit. Frankly, even disease. I mean, as much as I hate the notion of I've lost loved ones to what people consider this terrible disease, cancer. Cancer is not an evil. In all likelihood, it's probably been caused by man. I mean, and in fact, many of the ailments that plague people, and you want to talk about plagues, a whole lot of them came out of Europe, folks. And you know why? I think it's because they were shithole countries.
Literally.
Literally. I mean, when you consider that they were dumping sewage in the streets and that kind of stuff and living in that filth. You talk about Europeans coming here as walking petri dishes.
Yeah, bacteria. But that's the purpose of the wide brim hats that the people wore, the men wore, and the bonnets. The women had the bonnets. That's from what I understand. The explanation I heard, because they used to throw their slop pail out the window, They didn't have no plumbing. They just ran it right under the street.
Well, I think slop pail is being generous, but okay. But yeah, there are pails of urine and fecal matters, and it's disgusting. I mean, I don't know. I mean, look, I think it's important that people really delve into understanding what guys like Martin Luther King really stood for. What guys like, I mean, again, as the football season winds down and you realize that you could see an entire season go by without a guy like Colin Kaepernick, who was blackballed simply because in the prime of his career, a guy who stood for something and got punished for it in much the same way that Muhammad Ali did for protesting the war in Vietnam. Racism is alive and well in the country, in the United States and in Canada. I mean, make no mistake about it. For anybody who believes that somehow Canada is this nice place, and I it really tears me up every time I hear that. I mean, if somebody has a comedian or an actor from Canada, oh, but Canada's so nice. They'll actually introduce them as somebody from the nice country of Canada. Look, we've experienced racism. I mean, you only have to look at some of the films associated with Oka and Ganazadage to see the vulgarity of the racism that exists. And and even the dissension between the francophones, the French-speaking people of Canada and the rest. And anybody who thinks that Canada is so nice because of its environmental record, that ain't true either. They are ripping the hell out of Mother Earth, and they are exploiting and raping her on a daily basis with tar sands oil. I mean, and before it was that, they were flooding out huge areas, killing elk and caribou and moose, so they could spin turbines for Hydro Canada for their electric. And you know where they sent that electricity down? New England, right down into the United States. So lands were destroyed, inundated with floodwaters. Killing life as it existed, man altering nature. So anybody who thinks that Canada did it right, no, they didn't. And we're seeing that same exploitation happen everywhere in South America. I mean, I hear people talk about the food crisis. I heard one estimation that by 2027, the world will not be creating as many calories as they're consuming. That's not far away.
That's not too far away.
No, 2027. I mean, that's holy crap. Think about that. In 9 years, I mean, and look, it's an approximation. It's a prediction. Is it necessarily going to be true? But can you imagine that in 9 years, the world will not be creating as many calories as it consumes? I mean, look, as it is right now, there are far too many people consuming their an overshare of their calories, while far too many are not getting. I mean, there are plenty of people who are not consuming enough calories today. So the idea that again that narrowness, everybody can look at dollars and cents and say, oh yeah, the richest 1/10 of 1% have 87% of the wealth of the world. Well, that's going to happen with food, folks. Maybe it seems okay when it's just dollars, because we can look at a rich person and say, oh, I really wish I could be rich like Donald Trump, whether he's rich or not. But are you going to look at the
Rich
same
enough
way?
to buy McDonald's.
When you, I mean, and I heard somebody put it into perspective, and they measured it in Big Macs. I don't remember what it was, but they actually said by 2027 that the shortness of calories would represent enough Big Macs to surpass every Big Mac that has ever been produced. I mean, these are the numbers I heard. I mean, look, is it entirely true? I don't know, but at some point it's going to be true, even if it isn't in 2027. And how are you going to look? I mean, when you can look at an Oprah and just be wishing you could be her, or wishing she could be president, or whatever it is. If you can look at a Mark Zuckerberg, and you can look at a Donald Trump, and you can look at these people and say, I just want to be them. Are you going to look at them a little different when you're starving and your children are dying because you can't feed them? And you make all your jokes about Weight Watchers and Oprah Winfrey, but I mean, at some point when you realize that they're living large, and it shows on their waistline while you're starving and your children are starving, you're going to look at wealth in a whole different way when it turns into starvation versus gluttony. I mean, it exists today, but we ignore it. But at some point, we're not going to be able to ignore it.
You better pick what food you want to grow now, because that's
Well, and if you think you can grow it then instead of now, I mean, we better start better. I mean, I say it all the time.
Well,
We
it
better
takes
start
practice,
preparing.
I know that. I mean,
Yeah, it sure does. We better start preparing. We better start preparing for how we're going to feed ourselves. Because look, money's only going to go so far, and at some point, it's not just the distribution of wealth, but it is going to be the distribution of food. I mean, it's tied directly to the distribution of wealth anyway, but it'll be more than that. It'll be governments taking over land to do, create massive amounts of food. I mean, there's already talk about that, and China's already implementing some of that policy in their own country and other countries. Mm-hmm. They're buying huge swaths of land in Africa because they know they have to create a food machine to support their population.
We could make these big domes and grow lettuce.
And call it Plantagon.
Yeah, that's an idea. We could try that.
Oh, man. Well, anyway, I know it's late, but let me be the last to say Happy Martin Luther King Day. But you know what?
Junior.
Perhaps we should look a little closer and understand that he gave more than just the "I have a dream" speech. He had a lot more to say than that. And if we whitewash what he represented, what he stood for, if we whitewash what took place or the success of the civil rights movement, if we whitewash history, if we want to ignore the first 100 years of the United States, so even to the extent that there's plenty of condemnable moments in the 20th century, and I know some folks posted some things about the Andersonville and the the prison camps from the Civil War, but the prison camps for people who waged war against the United States is one thing, but the prison camps for people who are just victims of American aggression, whether it's the Japanese internment for World War I, or whether it's the reservation system, or whether it's Guantanamo, or whether it's the slave fields of the cotton plantations. Look, we better remember the entire history, because you can't shape what you can't understand the shape of the 20th and the 21st century if you didn't understand the 18th century. All right, folks, that about wraps it up. Hey, look, I'll be in New York this week. Catch me on WBAI. You can go to WBAI.org. That's Thursday morning from 10 till noon. Of course, we will be Facebook Live, so you can catch us there too. Shawnee Rice will be joining me, and we'll have a good show for you down there. We'll have some more to talk about, because every day there's somebody saying something that we need to offer a native perspective to in the news. So we'll see you then, and back here on Friday. Yahweh.
Yeah.
Stranger all around me makes me feel I'm not alone, takes me down some